Over the past several days, social media has been flooded with posts claiming that a brand new $2,000 dividend check could arrive before Christmas. Platforms are pushing headlines that sound urgent, emotional, and in many cases completely contradictory. Some posts insist the checks are already approved, while others dismiss the entire idea as political hype. For millions of seniors and low-income Americans, that leaves one simple but powerful question hanging in the air. Is this real, or is it just another rumor? For seniors living on fixed incomes, uncertainty like this can feel exhausting. When grocery prices stay high, utility bills keep climbing, and prescription costs never seem to slow down, even the possibility of a $2,000 payment feels significant. That is why so many people are hopeful but cautious at the same time. Hopeful because relief would matter. Cautious because they have heard similar promises before that never materialized. The truth is, this conversation did not start randomly. It was triggered by a public statement from the former president himself. In a post that quickly went viral, he said he wants to send a $2,000 payment described as a dividend to low and middle-income Americans. Importantly, he emphasized that this would be per person, not per household. That distinction alone is what caused the story to explode. For a senior living alone, that could mean $2,000. For a family of 4, potentially $8,000. For households caring for dependents, even more. But before anyone starts counting dollars, it is critical to slow down and separate confirmed facts from online speculation. Viral headlines are designed to grab attention, not provide clarity. And when it comes to financial relief, clarity matters more than excitement. The goal here is not to hype expectations or make promises that do not exist. The goal is to explain calmly and clearly what was actually said, what has been officially confirmed, what remains uncertain, and what seniors should realistically expect moving forward. No noise, no panic, just facts, context, and practical understanding. Because when money is tight, the last thing anyone needs is confusion. After the initial comments began spreading rapidly online, the next and most important question became clear. What has the White House actually confirmed? Because in situations like this, social media speculation means very little unless it is backed by official statements. And this is where the conversation becomes more grounded, but also more nuanced. A reporter directly asked the White House press secretary whether Americans should realistically expect these $2,000 payments and whether the administration is truly committed to making them happen. Her response caught the attention of analysts and policy watchers alike. She said very clearly that the White House is committed to making it happen and that the president has instructed his economic team to explore the legal pathways required to approve such payments. On the surface, that statement sounds encouraging, especially for seniors who are used to hearing vague or dismissive answers. Committed to making it happen is not casual language. It signals intent. It means the idea is being taken seriously inside the administration, not just discussed publicly for attention. However, and this is where careful listening matters, the press secretary also made it clear that there is no finalized plan yet. There is no completed bill, no confirmed payment structure, and no official timeline. In plain English, the administration wants to do this, but they are still working through the legal, financial, and procedural hurdles required to make it real. This distinction is critical. Commitment does not equal approval. Intent does not equal execution. And for seniors planning their finances, confusing those concepts can lead to disappointment. From an analytical standpoint, this response places the proposal in a very specific category. It is no longer just a rumor. It is also not yet a guarantee. It sits in the middle, a policy idea with active exploration underway, but without the final pieces locked into place. That may feel frustrating, but it is also honest. Governments move slowly, especially when large sums of money and nationwide payments are involved. The White House acknowledging the proposal publicly while also admitting uncertainty is actually a sign of transparency rather than deception. So at this stage, here is the reality. The door is open, discussions are active, and nothing has been canceled. But no one should expect a check to appear overnight. Understanding that balance is essential as we look closely at who would likely qualify if this proposal becomes law. Now that we have covered what has been publicly proposed and what the White House has confirmed, the next question is the one that matters most to viewers at home. Would I actually qualify for this $2,000 payment if it becomes real? For seniors especially, eligibility rules are not just technical details. They determine whether hope turns into real relief or disappointment. Based on the public statements, the proposed income threshold would be $100,000 per year or less. Anyone earning under that amount would be eligible for the full $2,000 payment with no reduction. That income cap is significant because it includes a very large portion of retirees, disabled Americans, and low to middle-income households across the country. Here is the most important clarification for seniors. Receiving Social Security does not disqualify you. The same applies to those receiving supplemental security income, Social Security disability insurance, VA benefits, or a combination of fixed income programs. You do not need to be working, you do not need earned wages, and you do not need to be filing taxes with a large reported income to qualify under the proposal as it has been described. In fact, many of the people this plan is designed to help are those who rely almost entirely on fixed benefits. Seniors living alone, disabled individuals, and retirees with limited savings are exactly the groups being discussed when policymakers talk about relief for low and middle-income Americans. Another detail that has been widely misunderstood online is how the payment would be calculated. According to the wording, this would be per person, not per household. That distinction matters. A married couple could potentially receive $4,000. A household with multiple eligible adults could receive significantly more. If a senior is caring for a dependent adult child, that dependent could also be counted depending on how final rules are written. For many families, this is not about extra spending or luxury purchases. It is about catching up on utility bills, paying for prescriptions, affording groceries, or creating a small financial buffer. That is why the eligibility structure has drawn so much attention, because it appears to include people who are often excluded from other forms of relief. Of course, it is important to remember that these rules are still proposed, not finalized. Income thresholds, dependency definitions, and verification methods could change once legislation is drafted. But based on what has been shared so far, seniors on Social Security and related benefits would likely be among those most clearly included. Once eligibility is discussed, the conversation naturally turns to the question that determines whether any proposal can actually move forward. Where would the money come from? Because no matter how appealing a $2,000 payment sounds, it cannot exist without a clear and credible funding source. The former president has repeatedly stated that these proposed dividend payments would be funded through tariff revenue. To understand what that means, it helps to strip away the political language and look at the mechanics. Tariffs are essentially fees charged on certain goods imported into the United States. When companies bring in products from electronics to machinery to consumer goods, they pay those fees, and that money goes directly to the federal government. According to public statements, tariff revenue has been significantly higher than many expected. In one post, it was claimed that the United States brought in approximately $29 billion in tariff revenue in a single week. That number immediately caught the attention of economists and analysts because it reframes the funding debate entirely. Here is why. Financial experts estimate that sending $2,000 payments to all eligible Americans would cost roughly $160 billion. If tariff revenue were truly averaging around $29 billion per week, then purely from a mathematical standpoint, it could take approximately 5 to 6 weeks of revenue to cover the full cost. On paper, that looks feasible. And that is why this proposal has gained more traction than many initially expected. Unlike plans that rely entirely on borrowing or deficit spending, this one points to an existing revenue stream. But this is where realism matters. Having revenue does not automatically mean it can be spent. Federal funds are governed by laws, authorizations, and budgetary rules. Even if tariff money is flowing in, Congress must still approve how that money is allocated. Legal frameworks must be established. Distribution systems must be authorized. History offers plenty of examples where funding existed, but payments were delayed or blocked due to political or procedural barriers. So while the tariff argument strengthens the proposal, it does not guarantee execution. From an analytical perspective, this funding explanation places the proposal in a stronger position than many previous ideas. It answers the "where does the money come from" question more clearly than vague promises ever could. But it still leaves one unresolved issue: approval. After discussing funding, the most emotionally charged question comes into focus. When would the money actually arrive? For seniors and families under financial pressure, timing matters just as much as eligibility. A payment next year feels very different from a payment before Christmas. Public statements have suggested that if approved, these $2,000 dividend payments would likely be sent around the middle of next year, potentially in June or July of 2025. That is the only timeline that has been directly referenced. From an analytical standpoint, that places this proposal firmly in the category of future relief, not immediate assistance. At the same time, many commentators and online headlines have fueled speculation that payments could arrive sooner, possibly even before Christmas. It is easy to understand why that idea gained traction. The holidays are expensive. Heating costs rise. Travel, gifts, food, and year-end bills all stack up at once. For seniors living on fixed incomes, December is often one of the most financially stressful months of the year. However, realism is critical here. Even if Congress approved a plan tomorrow, nationwide payments do not move instantly. Looking back at the 2021 stimulus checks provides valuable context. At that time, once legislation was signed, it still took roughly 2 weeks for the first direct deposits to be issued. And that was with existing systems already in place and agencies operating outside normal timelines. Right now, the situation is more complex. There is no finalized bill, no signed authorization, and no active distribution order. Add in the fact that we are already deep into the holiday season, and the likelihood of checks arriving before Christmas becomes extremely low. From a policy analysis perspective, the mid-2025 timeframe is the most realistic expectation. That does not mean earlier payments are impossible, but it does mean they should not be assumed. Seniors planning their budgets should treat any claims of guaranteed Christmas checks with caution. Hope is understandable, but financial decisions must be based on what is confirmed, not what is wished for. That is why setting realistic expectations now is far better than facing disappointment later. One reason this $2,000 payment proposal has gained more attention than many expected is something that rarely happens in today's political climate. Interest from both sides of the aisle. And while bipartisan discussion does not guarantee approval, it significantly changes how seriously a proposal is taken in Washington. Traditionally, large direct payment programs become stalled when they are framed as purely partisan ideas. One party proposes them, the other party blocks them, and the conversation ends there. What makes this situation different is that the underlying concept, direct cash relief for struggling Americans, already has a history of support across political lines, even if the motivations differ. On one side, figures have quickly expressed support for the idea. That reaction was not surprising given a long-standing advocacy for direct payments to citizens as a way to stabilize households during economic stress. From that perspective, a $2,000 payment aligns closely with ideas promoted for years. More notably, other lawmakers have previously introduced proposals of their own that closely resemble this one. For example, past proposals have supported direct payments for Americans earning under $100,000. While the funding sources and framing may differ, the outcome being discussed, cash relief to households, looks very similar. From the other side, the emphasis has been placed on tariff revenue rather than borrowing or expanding the deficit. That distinction allows supporters to argue that the payments are funded through existing income rather than future debt, which resonates with fiscal conservatives. When analysts step back and look at the broader picture, this alignment matters. Even when parties disagree on why payments should happen, agreement on what should happen creates momentum. It signals that the conversation is not limited to campaign messaging or political theater. That said, bipartisan interest does not mean bipartisan consensus. There are still debates over scale, timing, inflation risk, and long-term economic impact. But proposals with cross-party acknowledgement are far less likely to be dismissed outright. For seniors watching from home, this is an important takeaway. Bipartisan discussion increases the probability that negotiations continue rather than collapse. It keeps the idea alive in committees, hearings, and budget discussions where real policy decisions are made. Whenever direct cash payments are discussed, one concern rises above all others: inflation. Many seniors remember what happened after the pandemic-era stimulus checks when prices rose sharply and everyday essentials became harder to afford. So it is fair and responsible to ask whether another round of payments could make the situation worse. The Treasury Secretary was asked directly about this issue. Instead of dismissing the idea outright, his response was measured and revealing. He acknowledged that multiple economic changes are expected in the coming year and suggested that tariff-based payments could be one of them. Notably, he did not rule the proposal out. That alone signals that inflation concerns, while serious, are not automatically disqualifying. The Secretary also raised an alternative perspective. What if Americans were encouraged to save rather than immediately spend these payments? He referenced the idea of long-term savings accounts, a concept that would provide funds for future generations, including children born in the coming years. From a policy standpoint, this reflects an attempt to balance short-term relief with long-term economic stability. However, for many seniors, this conversation can feel disconnected from reality. Saving is important, but saving is difficult when monthly expenses already exceed fixed income. For households choosing between groceries and medication, inflation is not a theoretical risk. It is already a lived experience. And while economists debate future price impacts, millions of Americans are dealing with immediate financial strain. Analysts often point out that inflation is driven by many factors, not just consumer spending. Supply chain disruptions, housing shortages, energy costs, and global instability all play major roles. In that context, a one-time $2,000 payment may offer relief without necessarily repeating past inflation patterns, especially if funded through existing tariff revenue rather than new debt. That said, inflation concerns will continue to shape negotiations. Lawmakers will likely scrutinize timing, payment size, and eligibility thresholds to minimize economic side effects. These debates may slow progress, but they do not automatically stop it. With so much discussion, speculation, and emotional reaction surrounding the proposed $2,000 payments, it is important to step away from headlines and focus on what actually matters right now. Not what might happen, not what people hope will happen, but what seniors can do today to protect themselves financially while this proposal remains unresolved. The first and most important piece of guidance is simple. Do not rely on money that is not yet in your account. It is natural to hear about a potential $2,000 payment and immediately start thinking about catching up on bills, buying holiday gifts, or finally addressing long-delayed expenses. But nothing has been approved. No checks have been authorized. Planning around unconfirmed money can quickly turn hope into hardship. The second step is administrative, but it is critical. Seniors should make sure their information with the IRS is accurate and up-to-date. If these payments are approved, they would almost certainly follow the same distribution channels used for past stimulus checks. That means direct deposit would be the fastest option. If bank information has changed, or if a mailing address is outdated, now is the time to update it, not after payments are announced. Filing taxes is another key point, even for seniors with limited income. Many people assume that if they only receive Social Security, filing is unnecessary. But tax records are often how eligibility, dependents, and addresses are verified. Filing a simple return can prevent weeks or even months of delays if payments eventually move forward. Next, seniors must be vigilant about scams. Every time relief payments are mentioned, fraudulent calls, emails, and text messages surge. Scammers may claim to represent the IRS or government agencies and ask for personal information to release a payment. This is always a scam. The IRS does not call, text, or email requesting sensitive information or payment. If anyone asks for your Social Security number, bank details, or a fee, the safest response is to hang up and delete the message. Finally, it is important not to wait for future relief if help is needed now. Programs such as SNAP for groceries, energy assistance for heating bills, prescription drug support, and state-level senior benefits already exist and are actively helping millions of households. These resources are real, available, and designed to provide immediate support, not someday, but now. Now that we have walked through every major element of this proposal, it is time to pull everything together and look at the full picture calmly, clearly, and without emotional noise. Because when it comes to money, especially for seniors living on fixed incomes, clarity matters far more than excitement. Here is what we know for certain. The former president has publicly proposed $2,000 payments, describing them as dividend checks for low and middle-income Americans. He has explained that the funding would come from tariff revenue, which he claims is bringing in substantial weekly income. The White House has confirmed that the administration is committed to pursuing this idea and is actively exploring legal and procedural pathways to make it possible. And based on the income threshold discussed so far, seniors receiving Social Security, Supplemental Security Income, Social Security Disability Insurance, and VA benefits would very likely be included if the proposal becomes law. We also know that there is bipartisan interest, which is rare and meaningful. Support from voices across the political spectrum suggests this is more than just a talking point. It is a policy idea that is being taken seriously, debated, questioned, and refined rather than dismissed outright. At the same time, honesty requires us to be equally clear about what we do not know. There is no finalized bill. There is no signed legislation. There is no official payment schedule. There is no guaranteed date when money would be sent. Funding potential exists, but funding availability does not equal approval. And while analysts continue to discuss the possibility of earlier payments, the most realistic timeline mentioned so far remains mid-2025. This does not mean the proposal will fail. It also does not mean checks are imminent. It means we are in the middle stage where ideas are being evaluated, negotiated, and tested against legal and economic realities. For seniors watching this, the most important takeaway is balance. Stay informed, but do not let headlines drive financial decisions. Stay hopeful, but do not depend on money that is not guaranteed. Protect yourself from scams. Keep your records up to date and use existing assistance programs if you need help today, not months from now. Economic uncertainty can feel isolating, but you are not alone in navigating it. Millions of Americans are asking the same questions, watching the same developments, and hoping for relief that would genuinely make a difference in their daily lives. Whatever happens next, the best position to be in is an informed one, grounded in facts, not rumors, and guided by preparation rather than panic. And as this situation continues to develop, staying steady, cautious, and realistic is the strongest financial strategy of all.